Good morning, and thank you for joining us for Ask a QuickBooks ProAdvisor. My name is Amy Connor. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at WebGility, and I will be your host for today. Here's our agenda for the next hour. I'll start with some housekeeping items. I will introduce our two QuickBooks ProAdvisors, and then I'll give a brief overview of WebGility and our solutions. We'll start with some of the top questions asked by e-commerce businesses, and then we'll answer your questions. We do hear from a lot of webinar attendees that they'd like to see our software in action, so we will conclude the webinar with a short demo of Unify Enterprise Edition. All right, on to housekeeping. Everyone is set on mute. If you have questions, please submit them at any time via the question box in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If we don't get to your question, we will try to follow up after the webinar. You will receive an email in the next day or so with the webinar recording. So if you want to rewatch the presentation or share it with a colleague, it will be available on demand. And of course, we would love for you to follow the conversation on Twitter. So please use the hashtag AskAQBPro, which we've also put in the footer of the presentation in case you forget. All right, so let me introduce our QuickBooks ProAdvisors. Chris Robinson is a Gold Certified ProAdvisor for QuickBooks Enterprise and QuickBooks Online. He is a WebGility product specialist, and he conducts both accounting consultations for our paid customers and product demos for businesses interested in WebGility solutions. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thank you, Amy. I'm glad to be here again.
Susan Hawkins is a Diamond Certified ProAdvisor for all versions of QuickBooks. She's with Hawkins Financials, but is also a consultant for WebGility. She's been an Advanced ProAdvisor since 2009 and is also a CPA. Since 2014, she has been selected as a Top 100 ProAdvisor. Thanks for joining us, Susan.
Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm going to start off telling you a little bit about WebGility. We make software to connect and unify multi-channel companies to give them a better perspective and make smarter decisions. Our solutions help e-commerce owners improve productivity, see and understand their financials, increase profits, and get back to doing what inspires them. Our software is compatible with over 70 e-commerce platforms, including Amazon, eBay, Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento, and with all versions of QuickBooks, NetSuite, and Xero. Our core solution is Unify, which allows you to bring all your e-commerce data together so you can simplify and scale your business. With Unify, you can automate your workflows, manage orders, control multi-channel inventory, and reconcile your financials. One of Unify's core features is connecting all your store data to your accounting software, and that leads us to today's topic, Ask a QuickBooks ProAdvisor. E-commerce has some unique challenges when it comes to accounting, so let's get to the questions. We're going to start with some top questions that Chris and Susan get from businesses when they have questions about e-commerce. So, first question is, how do I handle returns in QuickBooks? Returns are a fact of life for any retail business, and you need to record them properly in QuickBooks. Susan, can you talk about that a little bit?
I would recommend doing a credit memo. A credit memo is going to put the item back into inventory, as well as allow you to give the money back to the customer. It's kind of a two-step process in the desktop version, and I see a lot of times people kind of forget that second step. So, you would go create a credit memo, and you've got a couple icons up at the top of the screen. You want to keep in mind as you create the credit memo, you then have an option, and this is where the icons come into play, to either apply that as a credit to an existing invoice or to go ahead and issue a refund, and then you can do that either via check, PayPal, credit card, whatever the payment method is.
One thing I'd like to point out is, when you talk about returns, there's really 4 different types of returns. So you can either have a customer return an item that is damaged or is available for resale, and they can either want their money back or they can just want an exchange. So based off what type of a return it is will kind of control how you go about recording that in QuickBooks. So if the item's damaged, you have a third step where you have to go in and make an inventory adjustment, reducing that item out of stock and putting in the memo that was returned damaged.
Great. That's great information, Chris and Susan. We're going to move on to our next question, which is about manufacturers. Manufacturers have unique inventory and order management challenges. And Chris, can you talk about how a manufacturer would plan their inventory?
Sure. So whether you're manufacturing your goods or you're buying them from a supplier, an important thing to understand is your reorder points and your lead time. So there's a couple things you have to know. First of all, how long does it take for you to get an item in stock once you've requested it? And that's the same for if you're ordering it from a supplier or you're making it on your own shop floor. The other thing you need to know is in that amount of time, how many items do you typically sell? So you take the total quantity and multiply it by the lead time to figure out that's your reorder point. Plus you want to give yourself a little wiggle room so you're not completely at zero. Once you know that minimum reorder point, you can enter that into the edit item screen in QuickBooks and then run a stock status by item report to see what items are below your reorder point.
Great. All right.
Hey Chris, I find that with your reorder point, I find often that's an overlooked feature that people are not using. So I'm glad to hear you pointing that out because so many people can use that and they don't.
Yeah, it's so powerful because when you go into that stock status by item report, you can actually auto-create purchase orders for all items below that reorder point. And you can also use those purchase orders to send to your shop floor as a work order to tell the guys on the shop floor what to build.
Right.
Excellent. So our third question is about a certain type of business. So some businesses have many individual items rather than having large quantities of the same item. It might be somebody who's got a vintage shop or they're creating individual pieces of art. Susan, what are your tips for getting all those items into QuickBooks quickly and efficiently? And is there a difference with the different versions of QuickBooks?
Well, Amy, I'm so glad you asked because you're touching upon another feature that I love. In the desktop version, there is a feature, again, a lot of people don't know about this one, that allows you to add and edit multiple list entries. It's right under the menu option list, and it's at the bottom of that screen. But when you go into that area, it opens up a window that lets you mirror Excel. You can customize the columns and have columns just like you have on your Excel spreadsheet, and you can literally do a copy and paste from another list that you may have. If you've downloaded from a supplier or something, you can copy and paste that right in, and that works with all kinds of inventory items, service items, non-inventory. You can even work with your customer and vendor list. You don't have that feature available in QuickBooks Online, so sorry for those QBO users, but it is a very useful one in desktop.
Great, thank you. That must be really helpful for people with those types of businesses. So we have another question about businesses that ask for a deposit or a prepayment up front, also known as deferred revenue. Chris, how do we handle that in QuickBooks?
Sure. So when you get a prepayment or a deposit, that's money coming in from a customer, and just like anything else, you're going to just receive that payment from the customer. What that will do is create a negative accounts receivable so that when you make an invoice for that customer, you can apply the negative accounts receivable to that invoice. So just remember that when you receive it, mark it for the correct customer, have the date correct, and then when eventually you bill them, you'll just apply that credit.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Susan,
hey, Chris, can I add on to that for you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that because I see with the deposits, that's an easy one when you have an invoice ready to go or where you're going to do an invoice. I find that people definitely run into issues with sales orders because you can't really receive a payment against a sales order yet because it's non-posting. So that's where, Chris, what you suggested, receiving the payment and then just kind of hanging out there for when you do eventually invoice, you can pick it up then. But I notice people can get a little frustrated when they're dealing with sales orders.
For sure. All right, we got one more top question, and Susan, I'm going to pass this to you. Can you talk about bank feeds? Customers have questions about, they know they want to sync as much information in QuickBooks as possible, but things get complicated with their bank feed, and is there a difference with the different versions of QuickBooks?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I see this issue a lot. Bank feeds can be such a time saver, but they also can cause a problem, and especially if you're using, Unify and integrating your sales, you're already capturing the revenue flow, the money flow on that, so you really don't need to be downloading the bank deposits as well, because you'll lead to double counting in that regard. So usually when we're doing a setup with the shopping cart information, we recommend posting to a clearing account, and then, kind of ignoring the bank feeds, you can kind of eyeball it, take a look at what the information is, but rather than downloading, just do a transfer out of that clearing account where we posted all the sales and dropping it into your bank account. So you've achieved the same goal of downloading those bank feeds, but without double counting the sales on the other side. You can run it, that's a very, very common problem with QuickBooks Online because it's so easy to do those bank feeds and they update and it's just a beautiful thing. You can run into the same problem with desktop. However, for some reason I don't see it as often on the desktop side. Do you see a lot of that yourself, Chris?
I see it from time to time. You're right. I see it more on my QuickBooks Online clients. And what I usually remind people is, a bank feed's okay. It'll have the correct amounts in your company file, but it doesn't really show you for income who paid for what, and then for your expenses, it doesn't show you what you paid to whom. So I usually advise people only to download things from their bank feed that are kind of miscellaneous expenses, if they fill up their car with gas from the company credit card, little things like that. But if you're actually purchasing inventory that you're going to stock and sell, that needs to be on a bill or an item receipt because that's how that inventory gets tracked. If you actually receive income for selling those items, same thing, that needs to be recorded on a sales transaction. If you're doing the bank feed, you're really not harnessing the power of your accounting system.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And another thing to point out to users, the bank feeds can help you fill in the blanks for missing transactions, but you're under no obligation to accept every single transaction that's offered to you. Because, like you said, Chris, you've probably recorded a lot of those already through your bill payments, inventory receipts, etc.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Chris and Susan, for your information about the bank feeds. I know that must be kind of tricky for people who are trying to get as much information into QuickBooks as possible, but you obviously don't want to be double counting any data. So we are going to go to your questions, but first we're going to take a quick poll break. So it'd be great if everybody could participate in this. We'd like to know what your biggest challenge is with QuickBooks. I realize that you might struggle with all of these options, but for this poll, we're going to force you to pick just one. We'd like to know what's your biggest challenge with QuickBooks. So is your biggest challenge managing inventory? Maybe it's keeping inventory in sync with your online channels, figuring out how to best set up your inventory. Maybe reconciliation is your biggest challenge. Could be customer and vendor management. And if you don't have all your systems talking to QuickBooks, if you're not using a solution like Unify, then maybe data entry is your biggest challenge. Or perhaps you are struggling with creating and understanding reports. All right, looks like we still have a few things coming in. Chris and Susan, if you had to guess, what would you think the people's biggest challenges are?
I can't wait to see the response.
I would say inventory, but I'm biased because I'm an inventory specialist, so I tend to help people fix their inventory day in and day out. So maybe those people gravitate towards me.
Right. No, I feel the same way. Inventory, I'm curious to see how many people pick reporting because I feel like a lot of people don't know all the great reports or all the customizations that they can get out of there too.
Great. All right. I'm going to share the poll information with everybody. Yeah. Let's see. All right. So, Chris, you were correct. 53% of people said that inventory is their biggest challenge. So, yeah, inventory is obviously a huge problem. You know, your items are the, you know, main part of your business, but trying to keep them all in sync and get them in all of your various panels is quite a challenge. Looks like reconciliation is also a problem. Data entry, not quite as big of a problem, but you know, if you're using a solution like Unify, that's really going to solve a lot of your data entry issues. Susan, looks like not a lot of people are having reporting issues, 12% or 11%, and only 5% customer and vendor management. You guys have any thoughts about these results?
I'm actually kind of surprised that reconciliation wasn't a little bit higher. I know that can be a big pain for people at the end of each month, and getting the system down in place where it doesn't take multiple days can be difficult for someone, but I'm not surprised about the inventory.
The reconciliation, unfortunately, I see plenty of people that don't even bother to reconcile.
Oh, no.
Or maybe at the end of the year, they'll reconcile for the full year, and that just blows my mind.
Yeah, for sure. That's very important to keep everything in tip-top shape. All right. Well, thank you, everyone who participated in the poll. And recognizing, of course, that you may have more than one thing that's your biggest challenge. That is a big challenge, and I appreciate you just picking one. I know that can be kind of hard. All right. So we're going to move on to your questions. We've got some that you guys asked when you registered, and we're also, taking your questions live, so keep chatting them into the chat window. We've got Brenda on hand here. If there's anything that she can answer quickly, she's happy to do that, and she's also passing some to me to answer live. So let's get into it. We have a question here from Elizabeth. She wants to know about accounting for donated or irregular inventory. Interesting. Who wants to take that one?
Well, there are a couple ways to do it. My preferred way is to do an inventory adjustment. Hopefully that sounds familiar to all you inventory users out there. But you can do a quantity adjustment, and then, when you're in that screen, you pick the account, the offset account, and you could either make it to a contribution. Often it's, for some type of community event. You could also call that marketing. The important thing just to keep in the back of your mind is that when you do make a donation, that is, the write-off is at the cost of your inventory. It's not at the sale price that you would have sold it for to a customer. Do you have any other approaches, Chris?
Yeah, so in the past with clients, what I've had them do is create a sales receipt for the items that they're donating or maybe giving out as promotional items to potential customers, and just make the price 1 cent and then do a discount for 1 cent. So the total sales transaction is $0, but you don't want to sell something actually for $0 because it messes with the ratios and the calculations that QuickBooks has when there's a 0 in there.
Oh, that's interesting. So we have a question, since we talked about returns as one of the top questions. Somebody wants to know about FBA returns that's fulfilled by Amazon. Are there any additional challenges for FBA returns?
I'll take that one. So FBA is different than any other online sales channel. And I know everyone that sells on Amazon can attest to this. So when someone purchases something, Amazon will release funds to you. So say they purchase a $100 item, Amazon will pay you $100. And then they'll also charge you a couple dollars in expenses and fees as well. And that all gets figured out in the settlement report that you get every 2 weeks. Then when the customer decides to return the item, Amazon's going to take away that $100 that they've given you before and then give you back the expenses and fees that they charged you. So as far as the accounting goes in the dollars and cents, that's all figured out in your Amazon settlement report. The other piece of the puzzle is that item available for sale or not? Now Amazon will let you know. They'll say, hey, this item's sellable. If it is, they'll put it back into stock. If it's not, they won't.
Great. Susan, you have anything else to add?
I'm going to defer to Chris with all his Amazon expertise.
Excellent. We have quite a few actually a huge percentage of our customer base uses Amazon. Many web agility customers are multi-channel, so they may have their own store and then also be selling on Amazon. And I think FBA is really becoming a big thing with Amazon Prime, and people want things fast. So I know there's a lot of accounting challenges with that.
Yeah, and in fact, for our Unify Enterprise product, we just released a new feature where we're able to see items that Amazon FBA has marked as sellable when they're returned, and we can automatically make an inventory adjustment in your accounting system so that not only are your dollars and cents correct from downloading the settlement report, also your inventory is correct.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure that's really helpful. We have another Amazon question from Kunal. How do we input Amazon Marketplace fees and enter the payments from Amazon Marketplaces?
So Susan kind of already talked about this. I typically recommend that you set up what's called a clearing account. This is a virtual bank account. So you just create a new bank account called Amazon Clearing, and you have all your payments, all your revenue from Amazon go into that account. And then you also have the expenses and fees from your settlement report paid out of that account. So total income minus expenses and fees should equal the amount of money that hits your bank account, and then you just have to do a bank transfer from the clearing account to your bank account, and then your bank account will look just like your bank statement for easy reconciliation. And again, you know, if you want to use Unify Enterprise, our team will help set it up so that whole process is automated.
Great. We have a question from Karen, who looks like she's currently using QuickBooks Desktop, but thinking about QuickBooks Online, and she wants to know about QuickBooks Online's inventory capabilities. Chris, you want to you're the inventory specialist, you want to take that one as well?
Okay. So the thing to remember about QuickBooks Online, the number one thing is they don't do assemblies or bundles. So for instance, if you sell just slippers, pajama pants, and the pajama shirt separately, fine. But if you sell a bundle of sleepwear special with the slippers, pajama pants, and pajama shirt all as one item, QuickBooks Online can't handle that. Basically, what QuickBooks Online does, and it's only for the most expensive Plus version, is it can count. So you can tell it how many items, what quantity to start with. For every sale, it counts down. For every time you receive new items, it counts up.
I think if you have not, I think if you're a new business with finished goods, like you said, Chris, I think you could probably be okay using QuickBooks Online. I've had a lot of problems for people that wanted to move from desktop to QBO because it's, you know, like you said, it's not as robust, and also the accounting is different. So desktop does an average cost on your inventory, whereas QuickBooks Online is FIFO, and you've got like big tax issues when you make that change. So it's definitely something to keep aware of. There are some inventory add-ons for people that are really adamant about QBO that people want to explore, but they're definitely, you know, if given a choice, desktop is more robust than online right now.
Yeah, and I may be wrong about this, but I think when you switch from average cost accounting to FIFO, you actually need to alert the IRS because it can drastically change the way your financial reports look.
Yeah, that's correct.
And for you people out there who don't know what FIFO is, it stands for first in, first out. So instead of assigning an average cost to each item, you track actually what you paid for each item, which some people may think is in fact more accurate. It's actually not in the long term unless you're dealing with really high value items like used cars or something.
Right, right.
Excellent. So we have an interesting question from Nina about drop shipping. She wants to know about managing pending build. Drop ships are making it impossible to make a build work. Is there any way to reallocate the items?
Wow.
So in QuickBooks Desktop, when you have an assembly item, it's not going to allow you to actually build a finished good from raw material parts unless you have all those raw materials in stock. So I'm guessing what's happening in her situation is, so that's where I don't understand where the dropship comes in. Maybe some of her raw materials are dropship items that she doesn't actually stock. In that case, what I would do is change the date of the build and to be after whatever date you receive in those dropship raw material items. And that should clear up the problem.
Great.
Who asked that question again?
Nina.
You know, I've worked with Nina in the past. Nina, I'll make sure to contact you after this to kind of give you a more in-depth answer.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. All right. We have a question from Teddy. Susan, I'll send this one to you. Teddy wants to know about creating custom sales receipts.
Oh, okay, that's an easy one. Again, more options in desktop than online. Online is really limited as far as customizing any of the documents, any of the transactional documents. But as far as customizing a sales receipt or any of the templates in desktop, you can do that under list templates. It allows you to go in and edit, and you can do a lot to trick that out cosmetically. You can play with the borders and the spacing and move your boxes around. You can add additional columns. You can take away columns. You can have things display on your screen for your internal users, but then not print out. So there are a lot of features that you can take advantage of in there under the template area. And you can have many templates. You know, you can have 10, 15, 20, whatever you need. The same thing, you know, with POs. If you've got a specific one for each vendor, you can. There's no limit to what you can, the number, and then you can just choose from the drop-down menu on the top of your documents, your transactional documents, and pick the one that you need.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Cheryl. She's using QuickBooks Enterprise for manufacturers, so another manufacturing question. She wants to know if there's a report that helps analyze the time between accepting sales orders and invoicing. Susan or Chris, either you know about that? Chris has a puzzled look on his face. This is when we should tell Cheryl we'll get back to her.
Yeah, you know what, Cheryl, off the top of my head, I don't know that. I'll have to do a little research and take this offline unless Susan knows off the top of her head.
I was a little distracted there trying to stop that ringer, so I missed that question, Amy. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It was a question about enterprise for manufacturers. Is there a report that helps analyze the time between accepting sales orders and invoicing?
You might be able to customize something, but there's not a default report that exists.
Okay. Good to know. The enterprise is great, but nothing has everything.
So, Susan, when you say customize, would that be in the standard customized report, or would they have to be using QuickBooks Advanced Reporting to find something like that out?
I think you would need to step it up and that's a great question, Chris. I think you would need to step it up to advanced reporting because you're talking about sales orders and then the invoices, and the regular default reports and customizations don't work too well when you're mixing in different types of transactions.
So I'm going to take a moment to do a shameless plug for Susan's husband. He's actually, as far as I can tell, the preeminent QuickBooks Advanced Reporting expert, and that's a feature that people who are on Enterprise Platinum already have there, but most people don't make use of because it's very confusing to set up news.
Gotcha.
Right, but it's very powerful, and it does come with your subscription.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. But anyways.
So go see the Hawkins Financial if you if you have questions about that. Good to know. So you got a whole QuickBooks ProAdvisor family there. Good to know. So it seems like we have a lot of questions about inventory, which makes sense because of our poll. Somebody wants to know, Maria wants to know the most effective process to get 7,500 items in QuickBooks to match the inventory in both Unify and BigCommerce. And this is somebody who's using QuickBooks POS, if that changes your answer.
Sure. So first of all, what I'm going to say is as businesses grow into different sales channels, it's natural for there to be different SKUs in different places. For instance, when you create an item in eBay or Amazon, they're going to automatically assign a SKU to that item. It's also natural as your business grows for that to become a pain. and you should definitely think about coming up with a common naming convention that works across all channels. And if you go into our webinar archive, myself and another ProAdvisor, Raphael, talked in depth about common naming conventions and, and the best ways of doing that. That being said, I know that can be very time-consuming and at a different point in a business's life cycle may not be feasible. So the way our software, Unify Enterprise, handles that is we do what's called a mapping, where we can actually instruct our software that, hey, Amazon SKU number 1234, that actually equals, you know, item name, white t-shirt in QuickBooks. So if you just make a spreadsheet that has one column with the QuickBooks item name, and for point of sale, we can use the ALU or the item number or the UPC. So you just pick whichever one is unique. A lot of times people use ALU or the item number in one column, and then in each other column what the SKU is in every other sales channel, and we can import that into Unify Enterprise for you so that it will know when it sees that SKU on the sales transaction what item to use in QuickBooks.
Great.
And Chris, I'm so glad to hear you point that out, because so often that's something I encounter when I'm doing onboarding with people. Is it's so rare that their, you know, shopping cart list name comes even close to what's in QuickBooks. So it's great that they have a simple way to match that up.
Yeah, and just to follow up what Chris said about webinars, we did a Christmas in July series last year that's available on demand at webgility.com/webinars. And they had one that was getting your books in order. There was one about inventory. So there's some great on-demand webinars if you have, you know, more specific needs. Chris also did a great one that I love the title of, called "Help, I Have Negative Inventory." So you're, you know, going to check that one out as well.
Yeah, for all you people that like to watch accounting videos in your spare time. But for real, they're pretty good. They're pretty good.
Popular.
Yeah.
I might be biased. So then we have a question from JG. I think this is a really interesting question. He started out with QuickBooks Online, but decided that it was not a good fit for his business and wanted to switch to the desktop version, but has discovered that doesn't think that he can switch to desktop from QBO without starting from scratch. So can you talk about that process and how to make that the most smooth transition?
There is an option right there under settings, like up in the gear button, that you can actually download at the top. It's not everything will come over, but it's definitely doable, and it's easier than you would.
So to kind of expand on that, I've done a couple.
You know, when you're.
Oh, keep going, Susan.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've heard horror stories. I have not experienced them firsthand, and even going from over to QBO, they are different platforms, and they don't have all of the same features.
Yeah, that's true.
Are not going to flow. They're not going to go up to QBO. And for businesses that have, you know, POs and estimates, that can be a really big deal.
So I have had a couple horror stories moving clients from QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Desktop. What you definitely are going to want to do is print out your profit and loss and balance sheet from QuickBooks Online. When you use that tool that helps you migrate to QuickBooks Desktop, open up your P&L and balance sheet. If there's a discrepancy, you're going to have to use that to do some investigative work to find out what transactions were dropped. Usually, in my experience, if there are some dropped, it's from the accounts receivable account. So just be careful. They'll get you either all of the way there or 98% of the way there, but it is that 2% that can cause a headache.
And when you do print out the financials and compare them, you want to look at both accrual and cash basis, which ties into what Chris said about accounts receivable usually being the cause of the problem. You want to make sure that they do tie out on both bases.
Definitely. Well, thanks for those tips. Hopefully that will help JG with his transition from QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Desktop. We have a question from Kari about integrating Amazon reports into QuickBooks. Looks like she's using Pro or Premier. I don't know if that that changes the answer. Chris, you want to take this?
Wait, what was the question?
Integrating Amazon reports into QuickBooks.
So there's no real way to quote-unquote integrate Amazon reports into QuickBooks. You can take the data from Amazon and put that into QuickBooks and use that data to then run QuickBooks reports, but you're not going to get a lot of those really pretty graphs and things that you see in Amazon. If you use our software, Unify Enterprise, we'll make sure to download everything, including all the expenses and fees, and we'll tie that back to the settlement report so you can be sure that all the data is in there. But from there, you're kind of stuck with the tools that QuickBooks gives you.
Sounds good. We have a question about barcodes. This person has 28,000 items, if I'm reading that correctly. Sounds like they're maybe an established business. It's been around for a while, and they want to get barcodes into QuickBooks Enterprise. How would they?
They can do that if they have Enterprise, the Platinum Edition, which includes advanced inventory. Barcode scanning is an advanced inventory feature.
Okay.
So you're not going to get that in, I'm not sure of my metal, silver and gold, I think are the other two editions. I'm not recommending upgrading just for barcode scanning because you could get an add-on that will do that for you. And in fact, a lot of people don't love the barcode capabilities in Enterprise and opt for barcode scanning add-ons anyway.
I wholeheartedly agree. The barcode capability in QuickBooks is literally the most bare bones they could make the feature. So a barcode is just a way of encoding a string of numbers and letters into one of those barcodes everyone's seen so that when you hit it with a barcode scanner, it'll input those numbers and letters so you don't have to type them in. And that's literally all the barcode feature does in QuickBooks. So when you scan a barcode that maybe has a SKU encoded into it, it'll put that SKU into a field in QuickBooks. But if you're looking for some sort of a dynamic inventory control where your pickers are going through the warehouse and scanning items as they pick them, or if you're having your receiving guys scan items as they're getting received, it's not going to work. You're going to need one of those third-party add-ons that Susan was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That is good information. There's so many different options, different versions of QuickBooks. We have a related question from Craig. He wants to know the differences in inventory features between Premier Plus and Enterprise, and he wants to just try to decide if it's worth switching. And I guess maybe in general, if you could talk about just the inventory differences between the different versions of QuickBooks.
Sure, I can answer that one. Going from Premier to Enterprise, the reasons why I would prefer Enterprise over Premier for inventory management, one would be the number of users. You know, you're going to max out at 5 users on Premier. But Enterprise will allow you to have multiple warehouses, which obviously are a big deal. And warehouses can also be, you know, delivery trucks. So if you've got a team of guys out there with parts on it, I usually suggest you treat each truck as a different location so you can keep an eye on that inventory and the flows there. And then of course, you know, multiple sales channels and Unify can sync, you know, have the preferred warehouse on that as well, which is nice. Within the warehouse, you can also have bin and locations. You can do, you know, we talked about barcode and weren't too complimentary. You can also do lot number and serial number tracking, which, you know, can be a big deal. If you're a food manufacturer and you need to track your lots while QuickBooks can do it, I don't think it does a good enough job, and I wouldn't recommend Enterprise for that purpose because it's not going to track the expiration dates. And I wouldn't feel, I have not put people in that when, you know, because they need to track the info for potential FDA recalls, and I think that QuickBooks can lack a little bit in that area, and you might want to look at an add-on instead. Any features I missed, Chris?
So one important thing I'd like to mention is in Pro and Premier, you have a list limit of 14,500 items.
Yeah.
So if you need to do more than that, you're going to have to go into Enterprise. I've seen before the list limit in Enterprise is 100,000 items. I read somewhere that the new list limit since 2015 is 1 million items, but I haven't seen that yet. Have you, Susan, seen someone with over 100,000
I
items?
haven't hit 1 million, but I have seen some very, very large lists in there, and Enterprise has been fine. And to your point about the list limit, people need to remember that 14,500, that's not just the inventory, that's your aggregate list, so that also takes into account your customers and vendors too.
Okay, great. So we have a follow-up question about barcodes. Somebody wants to know if you guys have a recommended add-on that you are familiar with for the barcode management.
So back in my consulting days when I was a solution provider consultant, I've been over at WebGility here for
A couple of years.
A little over 2 years. So I've been out of the game for a while, but the ones I've implemented for people in the past, one was called WASP Barcode, W-A-S-P, and the other one was BOSS Systems, B-A-U-S.
That would be better if it were B-O-S-S, but okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Boss House and design people. So those, maybe starting there and looking at them, I don't know if they've stayed up to date with technology.
Yeah, those are still, Chris, those are current recommendations. I mean, those are good ones. I've recommended those, and I've had enterprise clients as a follow-up reach back out to me and say, oh, I want barcode scanning, and I give them the same speech I just did about, well, you know, you can do it in QuickBooks, and I've recommended the BOWS one, and they've actually emailed back and say, oh my God, it's great, thank you so much.
Awesome.
So, and yeah, so those are good recommendations.
Well, not as rusty as I thought.
Yeah,
that's right. Still in the game.
For sure, for sure. So we have another question about inventory. Someone wants to know about adjusting inventory. They have about 1,500 items. What's the easiest way to adjust inventory all at once, just changing it little by little, mess with your accounting numbers?
I love inventory adjustments, and I love that someone feels the need to adjust 1,500 items. Like, that really speaks to me. I think it can be overwhelming to even think about that. So if you want to break it in parts, that's just fine. You need to go into that inventory adjustment screen and kind of power through it. There is a third-party app. I was going to say R for plural, but I actually can really only think of one. But Transaction Pro Importer, I'm a big fan of, and I know Chris is partial to it as well. Transaction Pro will kind of be the bridge between your Excel list where you might have those adjustments figured out and QuickBooks, and it'll allow you to import your quantity or price adjustments, your cost adjustments, and kind of, you know, move all 1,500 at once.
So one caveat to that, Susan, is, you know, you can try to purchase Transaction Pro Importer and do it yourself. I would highly recommend you retain a ProAdvisor like Susan or someone else who has experience with it, because when it imports perfect, it's awesome. When it's a mistake, it can like just ruin your company file. And I remember back in the day, I'd have clients who I'd tell me, I'm just going to use this software and this is what I'm going to do, and kind of give them a preview and an estimate. And they'd say, oh, that's easy, I can do it on my own. And then they come back and say, hey, I made a horrible mistake, I need you to fix it. And I'm like, that estimate was for not a horrible mistake. It's going to be twice as much for me to fix it and then do it.
Right. It's true. I see that a lot. And it is, and especially when you're dealing with inventory, it's really tricky, and you don't want to make a mistake, because even if it, you know, if you think you fixed it, it always lingers behind the scenes, and it comes back to haunt you or causes a problem you don't realize, but it snowballs behind the scenes.
And if you really want to do it yourself, just back up the company file first.
Absolutely.
And then if you're going to just do a manual inventory adjustment, if you're doing that large of a volume of items, I'm imagining this is either a beginning inventory balance, or you're doing your yearly or quarterly physical inventory count. But one thing about inventory adjustments is sometimes people get inventory adjustment happy. Really, you shouldn't have to do many inventory adjustments. If you're tracking every item, so the only reason items should leave your warehouse is if they're sold. The only reason items should come into your warehouse is if you purchase them and they're received on an item receipt or a bill. So really, there should be no reason for inventory adjustments except for the case of damaged items or items that somehow were lost and walked out of your warehouse. So you should be really keeping careful track of having to do that because it can show you workflow breakdowns where, you know, items might be getting misplaced.
Good to know. Got to keep on top of that inventory. We have a question from David, who's using, it looks like he's either using or is trying our Unify software, and he wants to know when an item is being mapped from Amazon to Unify and the item has two configurations on the same SKU in QuickBooks, such as a single unit versus a case, how do you map that? And is that different if you're using Unify versus Unify Enterprise Edition?
Yeah, it is. So if you're using Unify Enterprise Edition, we can do quantity mappings where, you know, in QuickBooks, it comes down to unit of measure. So in QuickBooks, it might be listed as an each. So you have 100 eaches, but you're selling it as a case of 10 on Amazon. Well, you can tell Unify Enterprise, hey, when you sell one case of 10, multiply that by 10 of these eaches. For regular Unify, in QuickBooks Online, you're going to have a different SKU for a case versus each. And unfortunately with QuickBooks Online, you can't really do a build transaction to build a case. So if you're on QuickBooks Online, I would recommend using a third-party software like SOS Inventory that can do those assembly builds and handle those unit measures. And that program plays very nicely with Unify.
Hey Chris, since you brought up unit of measure, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that because I see sometimes people have a need for that and they don't know what it is and they're doing kind of creative workarounds to deal with it. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, it allows you to set up to define a unit of measure. And you kind of have to look real closely at the screens to see what you're looking at, but you define your base unit. Which is always your smallest unit, and it's like if you buy a case of soda but then sell it by the can, it allows you to do your purchase order and bills in one unit of measure and then your sales documents in another without sitting there and, you know, dividing everything by 24 or what you need to do. So that's a nice feature that's available in Premier and Enterprise, not in Pro.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out your base unit is almost always going to be an each unless we're talking about socks, maybe. I'd find that one to be acceptable to be a pair. And then you can also set up different default units of measures for different transactions. So you can have, if you purchase by the case, you can have your default unit of measure be a case. And if you normally sell by the box, your default unit of measure for sales transactions could be box.
Yeah, that's one of the fun features in QuickBooks I really like to play with.
Yes. Susan, you have what I would like to consider an interesting definition of fun, but that's where you're the QuickBooks Pro.
That's very true, yeah.
That's where you're the QuickBooks Pro and I'm marketing. So we have time, I think, for one more quick question before we go to our demo. This is from Jill. Jill would like to know if QuickBooks has a reporting of history of items sold, a report of items received into inventory. She's using either QuickBooks Pro or Premier. I don't know if that changes with her version. Chris, you want to take that?
Sure. So if you go to any item in your item list, and this is true for also your chart of accounts as well, and you right-click on it and go to the bottom of the menu, you'll see something called a quick report. Now for items, a quick report will show you every single transaction that item has been on. So all your bills, all your sales transactions, everything. And you can do it for a particular date range. It's a great investigative tool to figure out what's been going on in your company file. And then with a chart of accounts, it's the same thing. It shows you every transaction that has used that particular account.
And you can do that with customers as well.
Ah, yeah, good point.
That's a good note to end on. I mean, the quick report, that so many people can use that. And I always tell people too when they're just learning QuickBooks, if you get stuck somewhere, just right-click and see what options pop up because you might find what you're looking for right there.
Oh, for sure. That is a great tip. All right, so thank you everybody for your questions. If we were not able to get to your questions, we will try to follow up afterwards. And Chris and Susan as well, if you have like more in-depth questions, issues, you know, and really want some one-on-one time with them, we offer QuickBooks ProAdvising sessions. They come, I believe, complimentary with some of our plans, but we also offer them a la carte for customers who need them, and they do all sorts of advising, configuration, all that kind of stuff. So just want to thank everybody for joining us for this Q&A, and thank you, Chris and Susan, for sharing your expertise. And we're going to take the next few minutes to do a short demo of Unify Enterprise. So if you have never used Unify Enterprise, this is a great way to see it in action. If you are already a customer or you're not ready for a demo at this time, no worries, you will not hurt my feelings. Hopefully this will give you guys a chance to see it in action if you never have. All right, Chris, it looks like your screen is up, so we're going to let you take it away. I'm just going to tell everybody that Unify Enterprise Edition, this is our most popular solution. If you've been with WebGility for a while, you may be familiar with its predecessor, which is ECC Desktop. And Chris is going to go through a few of the core features and show you how you use it on a day-to-day basis. All right, take it away, Chris.
Sure. So the main thing that our software does is order management from multiple sales channels. So right now we're looking at a Magento inbox. You know, I also could be connected to Amazon, eBay, Etsy. I've seen people with as many as 20 different store profiles that we've connected to, and you can either see them by store or in one global inbox. Our software will automatically download orders every couple minutes into the inbox as those orders come in, and we can see everything on that order. You know, we can see what items were purchased, the quantity, the price, shipping and handling, if tax had been charged. We can see all the customers' information that they entered in. Everything that we need to translate into a sales transaction in QuickBooks, we see. Now, the ones here with the check marks are ones that I've already posted into QuickBooks, and if I double-click on one of the check marks, it pulls that transaction up here. Now, most of these fields are configurable. You know, I chose for it to be a sales receipt. I chose for the transaction number to match the number coming in from the shopping cart. I chose for the customer to be granular instead of using a default customer like Amazon sales or something like that. So what we really strive for is that this sales transaction that we create looks just the same way as you would manually enter it, if not a little bit better, because we put in, you know, all the notes from the order, customer comments, stuff like that. In addition to posting orders into QuickBooks, we also can help automate your fulfillment. So people who have large warehouses with a lot of SKUs and, you know, do maybe 20, 30 orders a day, we have a way to create a consolidated pick ticket. So if we select all the orders and go over here to print pick list, what it will do is combine all those orders, and you can have one person go through your warehouse and get everything needed to fulfill all the orders for that day and put them into a single location. So instead of having all your pickers run all over the warehouse, everyone's going to a single spot to fulfill their orders. So after you get everything needed to fulfill the orders for the day, then you can also print out individual packing slips for each order, and these print out in a batch, which, you know, if you've been using QuickBooks to print out packing slips, you know how much of a pain it is to go into each individual transaction and hit print. So the pickers would then go to that one spot, grab the items from the packing slip, put them in the box, put the packing slip on top of the box, and line those boxes up next to the shipping label printer. The person in charge of printing the shipping labels can either scan the barcode here to pull the order into the shipping manager, or they can simply select the orders that they want to ship and hit process shipping. Once an order is in our shipping manager, we see almost all the information that's needed to actually process the order. You know, we see the ship to address. If you've programmed the weight into either your shopping cart or into our software, we automatically pull in the weight. It can also be connected to a digital weight scale if you'd like. We connect to your shipping provider so we can actually get the rates that you've negotiated. And once everything looks the way you'd like, you just hit Save Shipment and generate label, and a shipping label will print out. Once the shipping label prints out, a tracking ID is associated with the order, and we will automatically ship or automatically send that tracking ID out to your shopping cart and change the status in the shopping cart from, unshipped to shipped or from pending to completed, so that your customer gets an email alert that says, hey, your item's been shipped, here's a tracking ID. And then the last piece of the puzzle is we do an inventory sync. So imagine you had 10 widgets, they're listed on eBay, Amazon, and your own personal website, and you have retail sales. Okay, so you sell 2 on Amazon. We'll push that into QuickBooks as an invoice or sales receipt, reducing the quantity by 2. So now you have 8 widgets in stock in QuickBooks. We'll then sync that quantity 8 to eBay and your own website as well, so you have the same quantity across all your sales channels so you don't oversell. And in addition to that, we have a whole bunch of other features to make your life easier, where we automate returns, we connect to CRM, we help you with your email marketing. There's a ton of stuff out there, and if you're interested, just contact us and you can get a demo with myself or one of our other product specialists here at the company.
Yeah, one of the great things that Chris does is he works with our sales team and does, customized demos. So if you're interested in the software and, want to see specific things in action, he can do that. And we also have somebody who does it for the web-based version of Unify as well. We chose to show Unify Enterprise Edition today, but we also have a web-based version that connects to QuickBooks Online, whereas Unify Enterprise Edition is for QuickBooks Desktop. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar and the demo. So I am Amy Connor with Chris Robinson and Susan Hawkins, and this has been Ask a QuickBooks ProAdvisor.